If you're an author or plan to be one, get excited because this podcast is for you. Book Marketing Mentors is the only podcast dedicated to helping you successfully market and sell your book. If you're ready for empowering conversations with successful marketing mavens, then grab a coffee or tea and listen in to your host, international best-selling author Susan Friedmann.
Welcome to Book Marketing Mentors, the weekly podcast where you learn proven strategies, tools, ideas, and tips from the masters. Every week, I introduce you to a marketing master who will share their expertise to help you market and sell more books. Today, my special guest is Dave Rosenberg. Dave is a combat decorated veteran who flew the Navy's first mission to Operation Desert Shield by accident. Over the 25 years since leaving the Navy, Dave owned and ran multiple companies before starting Locked On Leadership, a consulting firm specializing in developing radically accountable, high-performing teams. Dave is a speaker and the author of Locked On Leadership, the tactical business guide to creating a culture of consistency, courage, and caring. A dear friend and National Speakers Association colleague, Dave, what an absolute pleasure it is to welcome you to the show. And thank you for being this week's guest expert and mentor.
Well, Susan, thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to this. Thank you for inviting me.
Dave, your focus is on keynote speaking, which I know is an area that many of our listeners are really keen to know more about the ins and outs of. How do you actually get into this profession? So let's dig and find out more about what it takes to be a good keynote speaker. In fact, let's even start with that question. What does it take to be a good keynote speaker?
The obvious answer, of course, is you need to be comfortable on the stage. That's number one. And that, I don't mean you can't suffer from stage fright, but you have to be able to overcome that enough so when you get up on stage, you can engage your audience and have a conversation with them and, present in a very natural way.
And I think in this day and age, that whole idea of being natural and authentic comes over. That's essential. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Some of the first advice, in fact, I was just talking to another very successful keynoter just before this call. You may know Stan Phelps, and the conversation moved to one of the first things I learned when I went to my first National Speakers Association meeting as I started on this journey was that if you're not the same person on stage as you are off stage, that's going to be a huge red flag really, really quickly. I mean, the moment they talk to you, because what happens is you get off the stage, and if you've done any sort of half-decent job, most people are so terrified of speaking in public that people come up to you, they say, thank you did a great job, blah, blah. If you're a different person, they're going to know that right away. It's going to leave a sour taste in their mouth. Your credibility has just gone out the window, and you really dug yourself a deep hole.
I think that's really essential, this idea of, as you rightly say, being that same person on the stage and off the stage. You talk about feeling comfortable and obviously confident to do this. Are there some tricks that you've used in the past and maybe you even continue to use to stay confident and to stay comfortable up there on the stage?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I've heard over the years, and I've been speaking long before I became a professional speaker. I actually started in theater as a kid, so I was on stage as a relatively young child, not professionally, but amateur theater. In the military, of course, we did presentations. You do briefings, and they go from your squadron all the way up to air wing and larger. My career path has had me in front of people, and every time I get excited, and this is really important, not nervous, excited. Physiologically, there is no difference between being nervous and being excited. It's how we frame the energy we're feeling. If you're getting nervous, tell yourself you're excited. It feels the same way. I only get concerned when I'm not excited before I get on stage, because then I'm worried about how much energy I'm going to bring. Because if you're not energetic up on stage, if you're not giving it out, what's a song, every drop of energy I try to give away, turn the page, right? Bob Seger, I think it is. If you're not giving it away from the stage, people aren't going to feel you, right? So I want what some people will call stage fright. For me, it's just that pregame energy, that pacing energy. And so I will inculcate that somehow. I'll shadow box. I'll do whatever it takes to get my blood going and my blood pumping. So when I hit that stage, I'm giving it out 1,000%.
And I've heard that before, that the stage fright, it's even good to know that. I mean, somebody like Sir Laurence Olivier, the famous actor, he always said how he suffered from stage fright. But as soon as he just walked on that stage, he took on the role that whatever he was going to play. Now, in a sense, you're playing a role here as a keynote speaker. Would you agree with that?
Yes and no. It's much like acting in that sense. I think in the beginning, it feels like a role. This is, I think, one of the really things that I keep a lot of people away from it. It feels like a role. There's a bit of that imposter syndrome. Am I really up here? Is what I'm saying really important? As you get better and more used to it, and you realize that, yes, what you're saying is important and people want to hear it, you start to become a little more authentic. So in a sense, I think as you're more established and get more comfortable on stage, it's less of a role and more of just being you. Having said that, and this is the paradox, you have to treat it like a stage performance, especially if you are prone. And you know what? Not even if you're prone, because I'm not prone to, as I said, to stage fright. It's not stage fright for me. It's the energy I want to inculcate. But I want to make sure I start off right. So in my mind, I'm rehearsing just that opening line over and over again. Make sure I hit that really hard, hit it really well. And I know once I get going, it'll be fine. So in that sense, it's a role.
You talk about knowing that first line, which I've heard is essential. The first line, how you open and how you close are two almost like the bookends that you need to know exactly how that's going to work. Because as you rightly say, it's setting the stage. And then at the end, it's bringing closure to everything that you've done. So other than learning those bookends, what other preparation do you do prior to a presentation?
I'm an extemporaneous speaker. There are speakers I know who are very good and extremely successful, and they write a script and they memorize the script and they treat it as a play or a movie where they are saying their lines. They know those lines inside and out. Their goal is to say them exactly as written. I consider myself a subject matter expert. And I think for many of our aspiring speakers, that's number one, is understand your material. Understand your material so well that you don't have to worry about what comes out of your mouth because you know it's going to be accurate and good. That's number one. And so for me, I want to know what are the points I want to hit? What's the outline? How am I going to get there? I'm not gravely concerned about how I get there, other than timing. And this is the piece, I think, as a speaker, where my biggest challenge is I can go on for hours. I can do the same keynote for 90 minutes or 45 minutes. Think about that for a second. If I'm not working off of a script, it's easy to get lost. So when I rehearse, I'm rehearsing to the timing. And that helps me give a better sense of where I need to be at what time. So, 10 minutes before I should be off the stage, I better be going into my closing story because I know it's an 8 to 10 minute closing story. Well, in order to be at my closing story 10 minutes before, I need to hit this particular story 20 minutes before. Those are the sort of things that I do in rehearsal.
What that brings up for me, Dave, is that you're at the whim of the meeting planner. And let's say that somebody prior to you speaking has gone on too long, or for some reason, they have to cut things short, or the meeting is running over and you're the last speaker on the stage. And they say, well, Dave, I know you were meant to give a 60-minute presentation, but we've only got 30 minutes. What would you do in that situation?
I would do a 30-minute killer keynote. But here's what you need to know. You need to know how long each section is. What am I going to cut out? And these are the sort of things in rehearsal that you can do. I know, for example, my opening story is 10 minutes. My closing story is 10 minutes. If I am only given 30 minutes, I'm going to make one point. I'm going to have my opening story. I'm going to make one point. I'm going to make it really well. whatever that story is, I can modify. I can play it by ear. So that second story or that major point is a 10-minute filler. And then I'm going to go into my closing story. Bam, 30 minutes, done. If I'm given 45 minutes, I can either make 2 or 3 really short, poignant points in between, or one really long point. And it really depends on who my audience is, what the outcome I want. So this is all part of what you need to do in preparation, is understand what the outcomes are.
And let's go back to that. You say, depending on your audience, what kind of preparation do you do prior to going in front of that particular audience?
One of the things I do consistently, time and time again, that I recommend everybody do is find out who the key stakeholders in whatever organization it is that you're presenting for. So if you're presenting to an association, typically it's the board members. If it's a corporation, whoever again, depending on what level in that corporation, but whoever the top key stakeholders are, find out who those stakeholders are and then interview them, trying to elicit their stories that illustrate your key points. And then weave that story in to your keynote at some point. You might say something. So for example, I was talking with Susan Friedmann, and she shared with me how she does this in order to inspire her team members or whatever it is, right? And you share a little piece of their story or a little piece that shows their business, not like they do, right? You don't ever want to come off like I'm the expert in their business, because you're not, but enough to know you say, listen, I've learned about your business and here's how it relates to you.
Yeah, that's so key, because then they feel that you understand them better. Maybe you're one of them. So there's that empathetic side to your delivery. I love that. Always love to talk about mistakes, Dave. What are some of the mistakes, not necessarily that you've made, but you can absolutely share some of the big mistakes you might have made in your career. But what do you see often keynote speakers, mistakes people make?
I'll tell you the biggest mistake I made in my career, and this was an early mistake. My initial keynote that I created was a how-to. It was here's how you transform your teams. And I got really specific and knew how to do it. It was almost like a lecture. And for a keynote, that's too much of a deep dive. And people, they nod their heads and they write down notes. And it's nowhere near as dynamic or as interesting as not so much how to, but what to. So I think that was my number one mistake. As I got better, I changed the keynote, and it's much better received with a what to do, not a how to do. And there's a distinction there. Number 2 is stories. You illustrate your point with a story, with an amusing story, and don't worry about the detail. Let the story show your point. And I see I shouldn't say a lot, but I've seen keynoters who don't tell a lot of stories. And frankly, it just gets old. We are wired to learn from stories. Reading, writing only became ubiquitous really in probably the last 200 years of human civilization, where everybody is doing it. We've been around for 300,000 years. Most of our lives, we've learned through stories.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I was exactly going to ask you about the whole idea of obviously being a good storyteller, and you hit the nail on the head. So thank you. And it's interesting that you talk about the mistake that you made, the how to. And that's actually why I prefer doing training programs, because give me a 3-hour, a 3-day training program to do, and I'm in my element. Give me 40 minutes on the stage and I'm like, So keynote speaking wasn't for me, and I never wanted it to be, because I knew that I was much more of a trainer teaching the how-tos rather than doing the storytelling and, the what to do's and having 3 points. I need to have far more than that when I do a training program.
Absolutely. And just like a training program from the stage as a keynoter doesn't go over well, a keynote from the training floor is you're sitting in a classroom of 10 to 40 or even 50, 100 people, but it's supposed to be a training. And if all you do is keynote and give them big picture stuff, people are going to leave with a sour taste in their mouth.
One of the questions that I get a lot, Dave, is how do I get a speaking gig?
I'm an old-fashioned sales guy. I learned sales decades ago, and I did it by picking up the phone and just dialing. And I still do that today. I make calls every single day. I go for associations. That's my target market at this point in time. And I'm using word of mouth to get into corporations. That doesn't mean you can't cold call corporations. It's just more of a challenge to find out whom to call there. It's a lot easier at the association level. And so you need to know who your audience is. It's like any other marketing. Who's your audience? Who's your avatar? Who exactly do you want to get to? And you cannot get too specific there. You can be too broad, but you cannot be too specific. Once you understand who that person or people are, what they look like, what are their challenges, what are their needs, create your marketing material that speaks to that needs and how you answer that, how you fix that, how you help them achieve whatever it is they're looking to achieve. And then just start, sending emails, picking up phone calls, picking up the phone, making your calls and presenting yourself as a speaker and ask them what they want you to speak. I would recommend if you're really new to speaking, just to get comfortable with your message, do the free circuit, all the Rotaries and the service clubs and Chamber of Commerce, anybody who's looking for speakers. There's a lot of people who want speakers who don't have a budget for it. It will enable you to hone your message, hone your skill. And if you're lacking in confidence, I don't mean completely, but you're not quite sure how well your material is going to be received. I know I wasn't when I created mine. I was like, is this really new stuff? I mean, this seems so obvious to me because it was based on my life's experience. What I found is that, my life's experience, but nobody else had it. So it was my perspective and people appreciated it. And that created some confidence in me to then get into larger and larger audiences.
And that's so important. I remember the advice when I first got into the speaking business as well, is that just do freebies, as many as you can, because this is one of those professions that you learn by doing. It's not that you can pick up a book and read and learn from the book. You actually have to physically do it, and do it again, and just keep doing it.
The other thing we have now that we didn't have 10 years ago is very easy to video ourselves now with every computer having a webcam. Even if you can't get in front of a live audience, record, stand up in your office, wherever it may be, and pretend it's a stage. I do this for rehearsal and go through it as if it's live. Don't let yourself stop if you stumble. Go through it as if it's live. Block it out, meaning I'm going to walk here, I'm going to walk there. Pretend there's an audience in front of you and look people in the eye, even if it's just your desk. Pick your book and look at that while you make one point, and look at another book if you make another point. Even that's going to help.
What do meeting planners require these days in terms of a one sheet or a video? I mean, what are they asking you for when you apply to speak?
It's all over the map, to be candid with you. There's no set formula, but I think any speaker is going to need to have not necessarily a one sheet. You and I were talking beforehand. I just created a one sheet. It's actually 2 pages. So is it really a one sheet? It would be on one sheet of paper if I actually printed it out. But nowadays, everything's digital. Before that, I had a 10-page brochure because I had more programs to offer. I went down to a one sheet. I'm not sure it makes a big difference because it's digital anymore, but a professional brochure in digital format. They're going to want to see testimonials, absolutely want to see testimonials. You should have a demo reel, a sizzle reel to start. At some point, as you speak more, get video of every single engagement or as many as possible. And I put up the raw, unedited, not made fancy. That's on my YouTube page. If somebody wants to see me speak, let them see me speak. I shouldn't be afraid of that. If I'm not doing a good job, I'm not going to get a lot of gigs anyway. Let them see me speak. And so the sizzle reel is marketing. The reality, I think, is they love to see, okay, what's he going to sound like on stage?
Yeah, that's very much so because, otherwise every speaker looks the same on paper. The puffery sometimes of what they think about themselves or what other people might say, as you say, the testimonials. But at the end of the day, it's what do you sound like? Have you got the energy? Do they think that you're going to appeal to their audience? That's key. Dave, this is fabulous information. And listeners, I hope that you're taking notes because Dave has shared some real gems here. I want you to know. Dave, if somebody wants to get hold of your book and find out more about, Locked On Leadership, because that's your brand. So how can they do that?
Well, my webpage is lockedonleadership.com, LOCKEDON leadership.com. It's funny, I've learned that my Philadelphia accent, they don't hear the beginning. Leadership, the longest word there. I don't have to spell that out, but lockedonleadership.com. And my book, Locked On Leadership, is available on Amazon.
And I'll put a link to that in the website on the show notes as well. Thank you. And Dave, I know that we're going to go into our premium member site studio after this, and you're going to share some juicy insider secrets there. But before I let you go on this side of the studio, we always like to leave with a golden nugget. So what would you like to leave our listeners with?
You don't need to be all things to all people. In fact, you can't be, right? So understand who your market is. It's not about saying, yes, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. I mean, I'm in leadership. You think, okay, you want to talk about communications? Yes, I could do communications. You want to talk about emotional intelligence? Yes, I could do emotional, right? Those are all leadership topics. Those aren't my topics. I don't do those. If somebody wants somebody to talk about communication, I refer them out. If somebody wants to know about accountability, I'm all over that. Be really specific.
And that's really wise because you've got a lot of competition out there. You know, leadership's a big topic, and as you rightly say, but it can be divided down into lots of more niche topics, and knowing that niche for yourself and what, you're good at and, who your target audience is brilliant. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And thank you, listeners, for taking time out of your precious day to listen to this interview. And I sincerely hope that it sparks some ideas you can use to sell more books. Here's wishing you much book and author marketing success.
The time is now to take action and finally build your book-selling empire. And the great news is that Susan is here to help you. Visit bookmarketingmentors.com and sign up for a free 15-minute book marketing strategy session with Susan. She'll help you discover your first steps to marketing and selling your book. Only those who take action are rewarded, so visit bookmarketingmentors.com, and we'll see you again next week.